2011, David Fincher's film The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, based off the book of the same name, was released, much to critical acclaim. The film is loved by its fans, and some call it an underrated masterpiece. There's just one problem with that though. It's not even the best adaptation of the book. In 2009, a trilogy of TV films were made, beginning with Niels Arden Oplev's The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. And yet, despite having a lower budget and a not as well known director, the film is better than Fincher's film. Just so you know, this video is a semi-response to two video essays online. One of them is by Screencraft and one of them is by Lessons from a Screenplay, and I'll link them down below in case you want some context for this. I want to look at why David Fincher, the acclaimed director he is, was the wrong choice for this film. I'm going to be comparing these two films, looking at three sequences in both stories, seeing how Fincher and Oplev did them both in their own unique ways. Oh, and spoilers ahead for both films. Should probably say that. Now, what I mean by subversion here is how the plot progresses using tension in both films, and how one of them succeeds in its motion and the other one fails. The scene in question is just after Blomfisk accepts the offer to look into the disappearance of Henrik Wanger's niece, Harriet, 40 years prior. Henrik decides to show Blomfisk around the island, showing him all the members of the family and where they live. Now, in both versions of this scene, there's a lot of information being thrown at the audience, but the way that they convey that information across is very different in both scenes. In Oplev's Swedish version, we have Henrik and Blomfisk walking around the island, with Henrik telling Blomfisk who all the individual people are and where they live, with a little bit of context and backstory to each character so that we know who they are. My point is, while it's not something new and unique to Oplev's style, it's something that works in conveying this information across the audience quite quickly. Through it, we get to learn that all three of Henrik's brothers were Nazis, and we get to meet Martin Wanger, an important player later on in the story. He's the brother of Harriet. Then, after this meeting, we get to see more information about all the stories, more people who died before the event, all this information being thrown at us that seems useless and...
Stopp, vänta lite. Vilka är misstänkta?
That's right, the main character of this story stops the montage halfway through. This is when we get the subversion in the scene.
Vilka är misstänkta?
Ingen. Alla. Det där du kommer in I bilden.
There is no starting point for Blomfisk in this investigation. He has to figure it out himself. The scene could have ended very differently, with Henrik either accusing someone or not saying anything at all, both of which are different to what's in the actual story here, and could have been a very interesting trope to build off for the rest of the film. Instead, we have no idea where this is going to go. We don't know where Blomfisk is going to start, so we have to watch him from scratch build up this case. We know as little as Blomfisk does. Now compare this with Fincher's bleaker and less kinetic version of this scene. The scene itself, for very obvious reasons, gives out the same information that Oplev's scene did. In fact, it actually gives us a little bit more information than his scene. Now, if you did watch Screencraft's video, he talks about this scene in particular being much better at conveying information than Oplev's. Screencraft actually points out we get the information about all the characters by learning the conflicts between all the characters, instead of just having it thrown at us in a montage. Now, in theory this does work, but in practice...
Quickly losing track of who's who here.
Exactly. The problem with this scene is nothing's visually happening. The two characters are still, and they're just talking at each other, saying names and pointing at houses. We have no idea who's who, despite being led to believe that we actually do know who's who by the scene.
Quickly losing track of who's who here.
Now, this isn't to say that this isn't a good way of conveying information across to the audience. In fact, it's been done multiple times in amazing ways before. Some of my favourite scenes are just two people sat down talking to each other. In the recent series of Daredevil, there was a scene between Karen Page and Kingpin which was fantastic. And there's a 17-minute interrogation scene in BBC's The Fall, which is amazing. Seriously, go and watch The Fall, it's fantastic. Anyway,
Quickly losing track.
however, my main problem with this scene is not the fact that they're just stood there saying names and pointing at houses. It's actually the last name and the last house that I have the biggest problem with.
And you live there?
Sorry?
Your house. Oh!
A subversion, but definitely more in the way Fincher does a subversion. We get the implication of danger, the scene ending on a note of suspicion, the characters implicated in the story just for the sake of causing tension.
The man who hires the detective should always be kept on the suspects list.
Thing is, it's good to have red herrings in a mystery story. However, this scene is never touched upon again, and nothing ever happens because of it. Why is it left in there then? Because Fincher wanted some tension to end the scene, probably. Looking at these two scenes, it shows us that Fincher likes to create tension over anything else. Oplev likes to keep an interesting, weird feel to the story, going in a direction we haven't seen before, whereas Fincher makes us think that Henrik might be the killer, but never follows up on this and doesn't do anything with this idea. I think the best way to see Fincher's attraction to tension in a story, even when it shouldn't be there, is to look at our next scene. There's no easy way to talk about this, and I obviously can't show the actual scenes on YouTube. If you want to skip it, I will put a timecode down there if you want to skip it. Right from the beginning of this scene, Fincher has a problem, and it's that we know something bad is coming. Now this may seem nitpicky, but it's a very small detail, and it's about what Lizbeth's psychologist is actually wearing. In Oplev's film, we get to see the psychologist dressed similarly to how he was in his office. We don't think anything worse than what happened before is coming. In Fincher's version, we see the psychologist wearing a dressing gown. Now, while it might not seem like much of a difference, picture a slob who would assault a woman in his own home, abusing his own power. Was he wearing a dressing gown? Now, while it might not be something that jumps out at you at first, it's something that leaves a small impression in your mind, and Fincher knows that, and it seems that he wants that to be in the audience's mind. But in Oplev's version, we get to see a man who sees himself as a professional. Now, from criticising a subtle detail in the scene to criticising one of Fincher's trademark things. No biggie here. Fincher's films have a very unique look about them. They're drenched in a heavy atmosphere, very dramatic, scary, colourful, but dark and dim. And as before, this is where the problem lies. Okay, what do you see in this shot? Now what about this shot? Now if we compare two similar frames to each other, we can really tell that one film is trying to give off that the apartment has a more realistic, safe look to it, while the other one goes for a darker and more dangerous look to it. Oplev's style of shooting gives us a realistic look at this world. The apartment could very easily be a normal person's apartment. Fincher's style floods the apartment in shadow, giving everything a sickly green tinge about it. And this is a signature move for Fincher. The problem is, it gives off the impression that something bad and terrible is about to happen. Now when the turning point comes in both scenes, we have extremely different reactions to them. In Oplev's film, we weren't expecting anything to happen, so when the brutality starts towards Lizbeth, we're there alongside her. But in Fincher's film, when the turning point comes, we kind of expect something to happen. We knew it was going to happen all along, and so it's more of a horrific relief that something has finally happened. Seeing such a brutal event take place in Oplev's film, in such a bright, well-lit environment, is really disturbing to see. Fincher's darkness and green hue, however, has already given us the impression that something is off, and so when something actually does happen, we're not that surprised to see it happen. We knew it was coming all along. While we're looking at the extraordinary in the ordinary setting, why don't we switch around and look for the ordinary in the extraordinary? In both scenes, we get to see a small character moment in the middle of the horrific event that shows the psychologist and what he's doing. In Oplev's version, we get an extremely creepy visual. However, Fincher, he can't help himself once again.
I forgot to ask you. You like anal sex?
Oplev's character is scarier because he takes his time. He prioritises folding his trousers neatly as opposed to the woman strapped to his bed right next to him. It shows how he sees Lizbeth and shows how he sees the world as a whole. Fincher's character, well, like Fincher, seems to revel in the dark humour of the situation, cracking a joke before hurting Lizbeth. Oplev's film shows us this is like the real world, and then shows us a brutal event happening. In Fincher's film, a horrible thing happens in a horrible world, and it seemingly undercuts what the scene is actually about. While in the context of the film and the story it kind of works, it doesn't work overall, because we were expecting something horrible to happen in this scene, and the horror factor wasn't really there. Now, in the climax of the story, it was revealed that Martin Wanger, who for the most part was the main suspect throughout the film, was responsible for the disappearance of his sister 40 years ago. It's revealed that he's a serial killer who rapes and kills women in the basement of his house. This scene is perfect to critique Fincher's style and show how it doesn't work in the context of this film. That isn't to say that Fincher's style is necessarily bad all of the time. In fact, I think most of his films, they work for the most part, but just not in this story. For starters, let's look at the design of the room. It's supposed to be a secret room that Martin has kept hidden away from everyone else on the island. Oplev's room is more like a heavy-duty washing room, somewhere you might go to clean your boots or clean equipment after it's been used in a dirty environment. Fincher's room couldn't look more like a murder room. In fact, everything's meticulous and just perfect, that it's the stereotype of a serial killer's room. Of course, both rooms look suspicious. If I found a room that looked like this, I definitely would suspect something's going on. Not entirely stupid. However, the room is not what I want to criticise. I want to criticise Fincher's style. In both versions of the scene, we start with Blomfisk and Martin having a conversation with one another. Martin in control and Blomfisk being restrained. Blomfisk is hung and starts to suffocate because of Martin. Now, in these two scenes, there's only two major differences that I want to talk about. And these are almost certainly Fincher's choices. Now, the first is the inclusion of music in the scene. The choice to have Martin listening to music while he goes to kill Blomfisk is just confusing on Fincher's behalf. In Oplev's version, Martin seems to find pleasure hurting him mentally as well as physically. He does so by giving Blomfisk hope, asking him if he wants some water, giving him that shred of hope that he might let him go. In Fincher's film, there seems to be a hint at trying to do that, but it's done in such a lazy way. Much like the previous scene in the psychologist's apartment, we already feel creeped out by the room and the lighting. The music adds nothing to the scene. In fact, it's almost comical. This is actually another case of where Fincher and Oplev both try to subvert the expectations of the audience, and Oplev actually succeeds whereas Fincher doesn't. My main problem comes in Fincher's trademark camera work. Now, there's a video by Every Frame Painting which shows how Fincher uses his camera and likes to move his camera through scenes, if at all. I suggest you go and watch that if you don't already know a lot about Fincher's style. If I were to sum up Fincher's style in one phrase, it would probably be purposeful and omnipotent. He often goes for longer, wider takes to show the audience what's going on rather than just cutting away to smaller separate things. He likes to track people as they move in scenes. In a lot of Fincher's films, this works incredibly well. This strange lack of movement and then the tracking often adds this feeling that Fincher wants to get across, the uneasiness. However, for some reason, it doesn't work in this film. The way it happens in this scene just seems to be off. I can't tell if the movements are digital or if they're exactly how Fincher wanted them to be. Either way, there's an off-putting, cold edge of almost an uncanny valley movement to them. They look clunky. It's nothing that you'd expect in a feature film and something you might see in like a student film. Oplev's scene is relatively still. He decides to not move the camera as much. There's a little bit of handheld stuff in there, but for the most part, we don't change from those shots. The camera doesn't move past them. It almost seems like Oplev's film does a better Fincher than Fincher in this film. It's strange. It's a weird thing. I like David Fincher's work, and I think his style is unique and interesting, and he's definitely made some of the best films of the last 20 years. But I believe there's a following around him that believes he can do no wrong, and anything that he does is great no matter what anyone else says. I think that that's harmful. In The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, Fincher uses all of his trademark techniques, some of which I've not actually touched on in this video, and you can definitely tell it's a David Fincher film. And it's because of this the film doesn't work. Fincher actually was the problem in all of this. He was not suited for this film. There's a number of problems with this film that I have, and I talked about 3 scenes, and I could probably go through every scene and talk about how I didn't like that specific scene. But if I did that, I would make an hour-long video, and I swear to God no one wants to see that video. So next time you watch a film that everyone seems to love, take a step back, look at it yourself, and think, is this a good film? I made this video because I kind of wanted to talk about this, and I kind of wanted to do it a bit earlier than this. It was kind of supposed to be around when The Girl in the Spider's Web came out, but I ended up filming it a bit later than that. So, you know, I'm just going to make this video and hope it does okay, because Fincher always seems to be a topic that everyone wants to watch, but if someone's hating on him, then maybe not. Yeah, so thank you for watching, subscribe. I'm probably going to make more of these videos analysing different filmmakers, different films, basically video essays about anything I kind of want to look at. So if anyone has any suggestions, put them in the comments below and I might just do it. I already have a few more videos planned out. Hopefully you'll like them. Hopefully you like this as well. So.
Quickly losing track of who's who here.